The arrival Lieutenant Dmitry Volkov stood on the observation deck of the Earth Defense Station Perseus, watching the stars flicker and dance through the reinforced viewing port. At 29 years old, he had spent 6 years patrolling the outer edges of human territory, expecting nothing more exciting than asteroid tracking and occasional debris cleanup. That quiet routine shattered when the sensors began screaming warnings across every console in the station. The Kralix Empire had arrived without ceremony or diplomacy. Their fleet materialized from quantum slipspace like a spreading stain across the cosmos. 4,000 warships, each one gleaming with the dark bronze armor that made their civilization famous across 12 star systems. Their vessels moved with predatory grace, forming attack patterns that spoke of countless victories against lesser species. Captain Hiroshi Tanaka burst onto the observation deck, his usually calm demeanor cracking under the weight of what they faced. The defense station hummed with frantic energy as personnel rushed to battle stations they had only practiced reaching in drills. Dmitry could see the fear in their eyes, the realization that all their training might amount to nothing against an enemy this powerful. The communication array crackled to life with a voice that sounded like grinding metal, filtered through digital corruption. The translator system struggled to convert the alien speech into something humans could understand. When the words finally came through, they carried the weight of absolute certainty. The ultimatum commander Tal Krex of the Kralix First Conquest fleet addressed humanity with the bored tone of someone who had delivered this speech 100 times before. His species had perfected the art of subjugation through overwhelming displays of power, followed by generous surrender terms. They had conquered 32 intelligent species using this exact formula. None had ever resisted after seeing what Kralix weapons could do. The transmission played across every screen on Earth and throughout human space. People stopped in the streets of New Tokyo, paused their meals in the biodomes of Luna Colony, and froze in the middle of their workdays on the mining platforms circling Jupiter. Everyone watched as the alien commander laid out humanity's future in cold, simple terms. Humanity would disarm completely within 10 standard days. All military vessels would be decommissioned. Planetary defense systems would be dismantled. The Kralix would assume control of Earth's orbital infrastructure, mining operations, and interstellar trade routes. In exchange, human civilians would be allowed to continue their lives under the benevolent oversight of the Empire. Resistance would result in the systematic destruction of human colonies, starting with the furthest settlements and working inward toward Earth itself. Dmitry watched the transmission with clenched fists. Around him, station personnel reacted with shock, anger, and in some cases resignation. They all understood the mathematics of their situation. The entire human defense fleet consisted of perhaps 300 combat-ready spacecraft. Most of those were patrol frigates and converted civilian vessels with hastily mounted railguns. Against 4,000 Kralix dreadnoughts, each one capable of glassing a continent, the outcome seemed inevitable. The Council's response in the underground command center beneath the Himalayas. The World Defense Council convened an emergency session. President Elena Vasquez of the Unified Earth Government looked around the circular chamber at the faces of military commanders, scientific advisors, and political leaders from every human settlement in the solar system. The weight of 8 billion lives pressed down on every decision they made. General Robert Blackwood presented the tactical analysis with brutal honesty. The Kralix possessed shield technology that could absorb anything humans could throw at them. Their plasma cannons outranged human railguns by a factor of 10. Their faster-than-light drives let them maneuver around human defensive positions at will. Every simulation the military computers ran ended the same way, with human forces destroyed and Earth under occupation within 72 hours of engagement. Several council members argued for immediate surrender. They pointed out that the Kralix terms were relatively generous compared to other historical conquests. Civilians would survive. Human culture would continue, even if under alien oversight. Fighting back would only get people killed for no strategic gain. Better to live as subjects than die as free people. But Dmitry Volkov was not at that council meeting. He was back on the Perseus, staring at his tactical console and thinking about something his grandfather had told him years ago. The old man had been a historian specializing in ancient Earth conflicts. He had said that humans possessed one advantage that pure logic could never account for. When faced with impossible odds, when every rational calculation said to surrender, Humans had this strange habit of fighting anyway, and sometimes, just sometimes, that irrational defiance changed everything. The hidden preparations. What the Kralliks did not know, what their intelligence gathering had failed to uncover, was that humanity had been preparing for this moment for longer than anyone admitted publicly. 40 years earlier, the deep space probe Wanderer had encountered debris from an ancient battlefield near Proxima Centauri. The wreckage belonged to a species called the Vorn, completely exterminated by the Kralliks 3 centuries ago. Human scientists had studied that wreckage in secret, learning from the mistakes of those who came before. They discovered that Krallik shields had a fatal weakness. The energy barriers that made them invulnerable to conventional weapons relied on constant power cycling. For exactly 3 milliseconds during each cycle, the shields dropped to 0 effectiveness. The Vorn had never figured out how to exploit that weakness because their weapon systems fired too slowly. But human weapons fired very, very quickly. Dr. Rachel Kim worked in a classified research facility on the dark side of Earth's moon. For 15 years, she had led a team developing what they called the Prometheus Doctrine. It was not a single weapon, but an entire strategy built around humanity's greatest strength. Humans were endurance hunters, persistence predators who won through relentless pressure rather than overwhelming power. If they could not match Krallik's technology, they would outlast it. The moon base housed manufacturing facilities that had been producing combat drones for the past decade. Not sophisticated AI warriors, but simple automated platforms carrying kinetic weapons. Each drone cost less than a luxury automobile to produce. They were designed to be destroyed, to throw themselves at enemy ships in waves that never stopped coming. The Kralliks could destroy 1,000 drones without effort, but humanity had produced 2 million of them. Lieutenant Mira Santos commanded one of the stealth reconnaissance ships hidden in the asteroid belt. Her vessel, the Silent Storm, had been monitoring Krallik's fleet movements since they arrived. She fed constant updates to Earth, tracking enemy positions, analyzing their patrol patterns, and identifying which ships served as command nodes in their formation. The decision President Vasquez stood before the council chamber and made the hardest choice of her life. The vote was not unanimous, but when she spoke, her words carried the authority of the entire human species. Earth would not surrender. Not now, not ever. If the Kralliks wanted humanity's worlds, they would have to take them over the bodies of every man, woman, and child willing to fight. General Blackwood immediately activated Operation Prometheus. The order went out through encrypted channels to every human military installation in the solar system. Defense platforms that had seemed dormant suddenly came alive with purpose. Civilian vessels in orbit received emergency military retrofits. Mining lasers were recalibrated as makeshift weapons. Every resource humanity possessed was turned toward a single goal, making the Kralliks pay for every meter of space they tried to claim. Dmitri received his orders at the same moment as thousands of other service members. The Perseus would not evacuate. Instead, they would become part of the first line of defense, a series of hardened positions designed to channel the Kralliks' fleet into kill zones where human weapons could have maximum effect. It was a suicide mission dressed up as a tactical deployment, and everyone knew it. He looked around at his fellow crew members as they prepared for what came next. There was fear, certainly, but also determination. They understood that they were part of something larger than themselves. Humanity had always been at its best when facing extinction. Every great achievement, every leap forward had come from people who refused to accept that something was impossible. The Kralliks had conquered 32 species. They had never faced one quite like humanity before. They were about to learn why Earth had never been successfully invaded, why humanity's greatest warriors were the ones who fought with their backs against the wall, and why sometimes the most dangerous enemy was not the strongest, but the one who refused to quit. The first move Commander Talcrex reviewed the human response with confusion that quickly shifted to irritation. The primitives had not surrendered. Instead, they had sent a simple 3-word message that the translation systems rendered as, "Come and take it." He had never encountered defiance from a species so clearly outmatched. It was inefficient, irrational, and ultimately pointless. He ordered the fleet to advance to combat positions. They would make an example of one of the outer colonies first. Probably the settlement on Europa. A demonstration of power would break whatever foolish resolve the humans thought they possessed. The Kralliks had done this before. The pattern never changed, but as his fleet moved into the inner solar system, something unexpected happened. The space between Earth and Jupiter suddenly filled with contacts. Thousands of them, moving at high velocity toward the Kralix formation. The sensors struggled to classify them. Too small for warships, too numerous for a missile barrage. What were these things? Dmitri watched from the Perseus as the first wave of drones launched from their hidden deployment bays. 2 million automated weapons platforms, each one carrying enough kinetic penetrators to threaten a Kralix ship during that critical 3-millisecond shield gap. The drones did not think, did not fear, did not hesitate. They simply moved forward with mechanical inevitability. The battle for Earth had begun. Contact, the Kralix First Conquest Fleet, maintained its parade formation as it entered the inner solar system. Vessels spread across thousands of kilometers of space in a display meant to intimidate. Through sheer scale, Commander Talcrex observed the approaching drone swarm with calculated disdain. His tactical officers reported the numbers, but numbers meant nothing against Kralix shielding technology. Let the humans waste their resources. It would make the subjugation process simpler. Lieutenant Dmitry Volkov gripped the edge of his console aboard the Perseus as proximity alerts began cascading across his screen. The drones were entering engagement range, their simple programming executing the attack pattern that Dr. Kim's team had spent years perfecting. Each wave was timed to hit during the shield cycle gaps, a precision that required computing power the Kralix had never seen from such primitive automation. The first impacts came as complete surprise to the Kralix. Kinetic penetrators slammed through shield gaps and struck armor plating at velocities that turned simple tungsten rods into armor-piercing rounds. 3 Kralix cruisers on the fleet's outer edge lost propulsion as the projectiles punched through their engine sections. The drones did not celebrate or retreat. They simply continued forward, wave after wave, targeting the wounded vessels with mechanical efficiency. The Kralix response to Talcrex's bridge erupted in controlled chaos as damage reports flooded in from across the fleet. His bioluminescent skin pattern shifted from the calm blue of confidence to the orange of tactical concern. The humans had found a weakness, impossible but undeniable. He had seen species resist before, but never with this level of technical sophistication, combined with such apparent technological inferiority. The Kralix plasma batteries opened fire, vaporizing drones by the hundreds. Each shot was a guaranteed kill, the superheated energy reducing the simple machines to expanding clouds of debris. But for every drone destroyed, 10 more pressed forward. The mathematics were becoming uncomfortable. At current destruction rates, the Kralix fleet would expend 40% of their ammunition reserves before eliminating the swarm. Captain Hiroshi Tanaka coordinated the Perseus Defense Station's contribution to the battle plan. His station was not designed for combat, but the retrofitted railguns mounted along its spine could still make a difference. He waited until the Kralix fleet adjusted formation to deal with the drone threat, then gave the order to fire. Depleted uranium slugs accelerated to a fraction of light speed, crossing the distance in seconds. The Kralix had not expected fire from the human space stations. Their attention was focused on the drone swarm, shields oriented to deflect attacks from that direction. 3 of Tanaka's shots found their marks, striking Kralix destroyers from an unexpected angle. The damage was minimal, but it forced Talcrex to split his attention. The humans were not fighting like a desperate species making a final stand. They were fighting like a military force executing a coordinated strategy. The hidden blade Lieutenant Mira Santos brought the silent storm out of the asteroid belt's shadow, her stealth ship's experimental coating keeping her invisible to Kralix sensors. She had 8 other vessels with her, all equipped with the prototype weapons that represented humanity's biggest gamble. If the Kralix shields could be exploited for brief windows, what would happen if those windows were forced open and held that way? The disruptor missiles were humanity's answer to that question. Each one carried an electromagnetic pulse generator, calibrated specifically to interfere with Kralix shield cycling. Dr. Kim's team had designed them based on salvage technology from the Vorn wreckage. The missiles would not destroy ships, but they would create opportunities for weapons that could. Mira selected her targets with care. The Kralix command ships were identifiable by their enhanced sensor arrays and central positioning in the formation. She assigned 2 missiles to each of the 5 largest vessels, then sent the launch codes. The missiles activated silently, accelerating on cold gas thrusters that produced no thermal signature. By the time the Kralix detected them, it was too late to intercept. The electromagnetic pulses hit the command ship simultaneously. Kralix shields flickered and died. Cycling systems forced into emergency shutdown. For 90 precious seconds, those ships were vulnerable. Mira did not waste the opportunity. The Silent Storm's railguns might be smaller than those mounted on defense stations, but at this range, size did not matter. She fired everything she had. The Turning Point Commander Tal Krex felt his ship shudder as projectiles tore through the unshielded hull. Emergency systems screamed warnings about hull breaches, atmosphere loss, and critical damage to the primary weapons array. Around him, his bridge crew worked frantically to restore shields while damage control teams sealed the breaches. This was not how conquest proceeded. This was not how wars against primitive species were supposed to feel. The other 4 command ships fared no better. One lost its quantum drive entirely, stranding it in normal space while the battle raged around it. Another took a hit to its reactor core and had to initiate emergency power-down protocols to prevent a catastrophic explosion. The Kralix fleet suddenly found itself without centralized coordination, individual ship commanders making tactical decisions based on incomplete information. President Vasquez watched the battle from the Himalayan command center with clenched fists and barely restrained hope. The tactical displays showed Kralix casualties mounting, their perfect formation dissolving into confused clusters as ships tried to protect themselves from attacks coming from multiple directions. The drone waves continued their relentless advance, forcing the Kralix to choose between conserving ammunition and allowing the drones to close to ramming range. General Blackwood stood beside her, speaking quietly into his communication headset. He was coordinating the second phase of the operation, the part they had hoped would not be necessary. If the Kralix refused to withdraw, if they committed to a war of annihilation, then humanity would show them what total war really meant. Every asteroid mining facility in the belt had been equipped with mass drivers. Every one of those drivers could accelerate rocks to kill velocity. The Kralix fleet was sitting in a shooting gallery, and they had just realized it. The desperation play Tal Krex made a decision that went against every instinct trained into him during his centuries of military service. He ordered a general retreat, not a withdrawal to regroup, but a full combat disengagement. The fleet would pull back beyond the orbit of Neptune, reassess the situation, and determine whether conquering this species was worth the casualties they were inflicting. But humanity had no intention of letting the Kralix retreat unmolested. Dr. Rachel Kim activated the final element of the Prometheus Doctrine from her lunar facility. The moon-based laser arrays that the Kralix had dismissed as planetary defense weapons suddenly revealed their true purpose. Each array could focus energy into the network of reflector satellites Dimitri's team had been deploying for years. The concentrated laser fire bounced through the satellite network, intensifying with each reflection. When the beams finally converged on the retreating Kralix rearguard, they carried enough energy to overwhelm even properly functioning shields. 3 Kralix battleships died in the opening salvo, their hulls melting under sustained laser bombardment. The rest accelerated harder, desperate to escape the kill zone. Lieutenant Santos pursued with the Silent Storm, harassing the retreat with hit-and-run attacks. Her stealth capabilities let her strike from unexpected angles, then disappear before the Kralix could respond effectively. She targeted propulsion systems primarily, trying to cripple ships rather than destroy them. Each crippled vessel was one more obstacle the Kralix had to navigate around, one more delay in their escape. The cost of victory. Dmitry Volkov surveyed the damage to the Perseus with exhausted satisfaction. The defense station had taken multiple hits during the battle, losing 2 of its 4 habitation modules and suffering casualties that numbered in the hundreds. But they had survived. More importantly, they had won. The Kralix fleet was in full retreat, leaving behind 23 destroyed vessels and dozens more damaged. The celebration in the Himalayan command center was subdued. President Vasquez knew they had won a battle, not a war. The Kralix Empire controlled vast territories and commanded fleets that numbered in the tens of thousands. This first conquest fleet was just the beginning. When word of this defeat reached the Kralix homeworld, they would return with overwhelming force. Captain Tanaka organized rescue operations for the survivors floating in damaged ships and escape pods throughout the battle zone. Human and Kralix casualties mingled in the triage centers. enemy soldiers becoming patients once the shooting stopped. Some of the Kralix survivors seemed confused by the medical care they received, as if they had never considered that defeated enemies might be treated with compassion. General Blackwood was already planning the next phase of Earth's defense. The victory had bought them time, perhaps months or even years before the Kralix mounted a serious second invasion attempt. That time would be spent fortifying, building more drones, improving their weapons, and most importantly, spreading word throughout the galaxy that humanity was not an easy conquest. Other species who lived under Kralix rule might hear the story and find hope. Resistance might spread. The aftermath, 3 weeks after the battle, Lieutenant Dmitry Volkov stood in the memorial garden aboard the rebuilt Perseus station, reading the names of those who had not survived the Kralix assault. 247 personnel had died defending the station, their sacrifice ensuring that Earth's early warning network remained intact. He traced his fingers over the names etched in synthetic stone, memorizing faces of people he had worked beside for years. The solar system was transforming into a fortress. Every human settlement from Mercury to the Kuiper Belt had become a military installation. Civilian production facilities were being converted to manufacture weapons, drones, and defensive systems. Children on Earth practiced evacuation drills in school. The carefree innocence of the pre-contact era had died the moment the Kralix fleet appeared, replaced by the grim determination of a species fighting for survival. Dr. Rachel Kim barely slept anymore. Her lunar facility operated around the clock, analyzing captured Kralix technology from the destroyed vessels. Every scrap of wreckage was a treasure trove of information. She studied their shield generators, their power distribution systems, their weapons targeting algorithms. Each discovery fed into improved designs for human defensive systems. The technological gap was closing, but far too slowly. The prisoner's commander, Tal Krex, sat in a detention facility beneath the lunar surface, his crystalline prison cell designed to his species-specific environmental needs. President Vasquez had ordered that captured Kralix personnel be treated in accordance with humanitarian principles, despite vocal opposition from citizens who wanted revenge. The commander spent his days being interviewed by human military intelligence officers, his responses creating a detailed picture of the empire he served. What surprised the human interrogators was Tal Krex's willingness to cooperate. He answered questions about Kralix military doctrine, fleet compositions, and strategic objectives with minimal resistance. When asked why, he gave an answer that chilled everyone who heard it. The Kralix Empire was not a monolithic force of conquest. It was a desperate civilization fleeing something worse, expanding outward because the alternative was annihilation. Lieutenant Mira Santos was present for one of these interrogation sessions. She listened as Tal Krex described the Devourers, a species of hive-minded machines that consumed entire star systems, breaking down matter to fuel their expansion. The Kralix had encountered them 2,000 years ago at the edge of their original territory. Every war since then, every conquest, every subjugated species, was part of their strategy to build buffer zones between themselves and the Devourers. The revelation complicated humanity's moral position. The Kralix were invaders, yes, but they were also refugees. Their cruelty was born from terror, their aggression a defense mechanism against an even greater threat. It did not excuse their actions, but it explained them. President Vasquez faced a choice: continue fighting the Kralix as enemies or attempt to forge an alliance against the common threat. The diplomatic gambit. The World Defense Council convened again, this time with a very different agenda. General Blackwood presented intelligence gathered from Kralix prisoners, including detailed information about the Devourer threat. The machines were still 300 light-years away, but they advanced at a steady pace, consuming everything in their path. At current projections, they would reach Kralix space within 2 centuries. Earth's position meant humanity had perhaps 500 years before the Devourers became a direct threat. President Vasquez proposed something radical. Instead of preparing for the next Kralix invasion, humanity would offer a truce, not surrender but cooperation. Earth would share the defensive technologies that had proven effective against Kralix shields. In exchange, the Kralix would provide their advanced propulsion systems and energy weapons. Together, they might develop strategies to slow or stop the Devourer advance. The proposal met fierce resistance. Many council members argued that trusting the Kralix was suicide. They had proven themselves to be aggressors who only understood strength. Offering cooperation would be interpreted as weakness, inviting another invasion attempt. Better to fortify, to build up human defenses until they were unassailable, and worry about the devourer threat when it became immediate. Captain Hiroshi Tanaka spoke up from his position as the Perseus station commander. He described his experience treating wounded Kralik soldiers after the battle. He had watched them recognize the humanity in their captors, seen their confusion transform into something approaching respect. The Kraliks were not monsters. They were people, albeit alien people, capable of change when confronted with an alternative to endless war. The negotiation. The first formal peace talks took place aboard a neutral station in the asteroid belt. Hastily constructed for this purpose, President Vasquez led the human delegation, accompanied by General Blackwood and Dr. Kim. The Kralik sent High Magistrate Ven Kalar, a senior diplomatic official with authority to negotiate on behalf of the Empire. Commander Talcrex attended as well, now serving as a cultural advisor to both sides. The negotiations were tense from the beginning. Ven Kalar opened by demanding that humanity acknowledge Kralik supremacy and accept protectorate status. Vasquez responded by pointing out that the Kralik's fleet currently sitting in pieces throughout human space suggested a different power dynamic. The Kraliks had underestimated humanity once. Did they really want to make that mistake again? Dr. Kim presented the technical data from her research, showing the Kralik's representatives exactly how humans had exploited the shield cycle weakness. She explained that this information would be disseminated to every species currently under Kralik's occupation within a month, unless a peace agreement was reached. The threat was clear. Continue hostile actions and the Kralik's empire would face rebellions on every conquered world. The turning point came when Ven Kalar finally acknowledged the reality of the situation. The Kraliks had encountered a species that refused to be conquered easily. Continuing the war would be costly in resources and lives, neither of which the Empire could afford to waste with the devourer threat looming. More importantly, humanity had demonstrated technological innovation that the Kraliks themselves lacked. Perhaps cooperation was not weakness, but strategic wisdom. The new alliance, the Treaty of Titan, named for the moon the Kraliks had destroyed in their demonstration of power, established formal relations between humanity and the Kraliks Empire. The agreement included mutual defense provisions, technology exchange programs, and most controversially, a joint military command structure to coordinate resistance against the devourers. The Kraliks agreed to withdraw from human space and recognize Earth's sovereignty. In exchange, humanity would contribute their military innovations to the broader defensive strategy. Not everyone celebrated the treaty. Lieutenant Dmitry Volkov read the terms with mixed feelings. He understood the strategic necessity, but part of him recoiled at the idea of cooperating with an enemy that had threatened his homeworld. The families of those killed in the battle struggled even more with the concept of forgiving the Kraliks. Peace might be practical, but that did not make it easy. Lieutenant Santos took a position with the newly formed Joint Research Initiative, working alongside Kralik scientists to develop hybrid technologies. She found herself surprised by how much she had in common with her former enemies. They told stories of their homeworld, of families they had left behind, of the constant fear that drove their civilization's expansion. The war had made them all victims in different ways. President Vasquez addressed the people of Earth in a broadcast that reached every corner of human space. She acknowledged the pain of the past weeks, the losses suffered, the fear everyone had experienced, but she also spoke about the future they had secured through courage and sacrifice.
Humanity had faced annihilation and refused to surrender.
That victory gave them the right to choose their path forward, and she believed that path led toward cooperation rather than continued conflict. The long peace 5 years passed. The joint human Kraliks defensive installations along the border with devourer territory reported steady progress in developing countermeasures. The machines were still advancing, but slowly now, delayed by automated defense platforms using tactics developed through the cooperation of two species who had once been enemies. Humanity contributed guerrilla warfare strategies and rapid adaptation techniques. The Kraliks provided industrial-scale manufacturing and long-range weapon systems. Dmitry Volkov commanded his own vessel now, a joint-design frigate that combined human maneuverability with Kraliks shielding technology. His crew included both species, working together with an efficiency that would have seemed impossible during the initial invasion. They patrolled the buffer zones, protecting settlements and investigating devourer probe activities. The war was not over, but humanity had found allies in the fight. Dr. Kim's research had unlocked possibilities neither species had imagined alone. Human creativity combined with Krallick's technological sophistication produced innovations that pushed the boundaries of known physics. Prototype weapons that could disrupt devourer machine consciousness, shield systems that could withstand sustained bombardment, propulsion technologies that might one day let them evacuate entire populations if defensive lines failed. Captain Tanaka retired from military service and opened a cultural exchange center on Luna, facilitating understanding between humans and Kralliks. He believed that the peace they had built would only last if both species saw each other as partners rather than reluctant allies. His center hosted art exhibitions, scientific symposiums, and educational programs designed to break down the remaining barriers of mistrust. The warning. But in the deep reaches of space, beyond the edge of explored territory, the devourers continued their advance. The machines did not negotiate, did not tire, did not stop. They had consumed 1,000 civilizations over millions of years. The alliance between humanity and the Kralliks was a minor obstacle, nothing more. They would reach inhabited space eventually. When they did, the real test would begin. President Vasquez, now in her second term, stood in the same Himalayan command center where she had made the decision to resist the Kralliks' invasion. The Situation Room's displays showed the current state of defensive preparations. It was not enough. Even with Kralliks' technology and human ingenuity combined, the projections suggested that the defensive lines would eventually fail. The devourers were too numerous, too relentless. She thought about the choice she had made years ago to fight rather than surrender. That decision had saved humanity from subjugation, but it had also revealed a larger threat. Sometimes resistance was not enough. Sometimes survival required transformation, adaptation, the courage to become something new. Humanity had evolved from fragmented nations into a unified world government in response to external threat. Perhaps the next evolution would be even more profound. General Blackwood entered the command center with new intelligence reports. Deep space probes had detected anomalies beyond devourer space, energy signatures that did not match any known technology. There were other players in this cosmic game, civilizations that had survived encounters with the machines. Finding them, learning from them, might provide the key to ultimate survival. Humanity had proven it could fight. Now it needed to prove it could endure. Lieutenant Mira Santos received new orders for the Silent Storm. She would lead an expedition beyond the defensive perimeter, searching for these mysterious signals. It was a dangerous mission with low probability of success, but that had never stopped humanity before. They had faced an invasion fleet and won. They had turned enemies into allies. Whatever came next, whatever challenges the universe presented, humanity would face them the same way they always had. Together, defiant and utterly unwilling to surrender. The story of Earth's first contact with the Kralliks Empire became legend throughout known space. Other species heard about the humans who had refused to kneel, who had found weakness in seemingly perfect defenses, who had transformed war into peace through courage and compromise. The galaxy was vast and full of threats, but it was also full of potential allies, of species who might stand together against the darkness. Dmitry Volkov looked out at the stars from his ship's bridge and felt hope for the first time since the Kralliks had arrived. The universe was dangerous, yes, but it was also beautiful. Humanity had earned its place among the stars through sacrifice and determination. Whatever came next, they would face it standing tall, weapons ready, but hands also extended in friendship to those willing to grasp them. The war for survival had just begun, but humanity had already won something more important. The right to fight for their future on their own terms.